The tournament hall was buzzing. Chandeliers cast a warm glow on polished wooden floors, reflecting the excitement of the annual International Masters exhibition in Vienna. The place smelled faintly of polished oak and coffee, the hum of whispers mingled with the occasional clink of glasses. At the center, on a raised stage surrounded by rows of spectators, sat Grandmaster Viktor Antonov, a man whose reputation preceded him. With silver streaks in his thick dark hair, a cold, calculating stare, and the weight of 5 world titles behind him, Viktor was a legend. To play him, even in a casual exhibition, was an honor. To beat him was a fantasy. And tonight, Viktor was in his element. He was scheduled to play a simul match, 20 boards set up in a semicircle, 20 eager opponents, and one grandmaster walking calmly from board to board, making his move with the same ease a pianist touches keys. The audience adored it. Cameras flashed. Children leaned forward in their seats, clutching miniature chessboards purchased at the souvenir stall. Every move Viktor made was met with hushed awe. But Viktor was bored. He thrived on serious matches, on grand stages where silence could crush you, and each move meant glory or humiliation. Tonight, this was nothing more than a performance. He smiled thinly as he demolished a university champion in 14 moves, then shook hands with a businessman whose nervous laugh betrayed his blunders. And then, in the middle of it all, something unusual happened. As Viktor paced past the 10th board, a commotion rippled through the crowd. Near the entrance, a woman in a plain gray dress, holding a worn leather handbag, stood uncertainly. She looked entirely out of place among the glittering gowns and tailored suits. Her hair was pulled back into a simple bun, streaks of silver framing her face. She looked to be in her early 50s, her shoes scuffed, her dress clean but old-fashioned. She clutched her bag tightly as if she wasn't sure whether she belonged. Some laughed softly, others whispered, "Who let her in?" A volunteer tried to guide her to the audience seating, but Viktor, amused by the interruption, raised his hand. "Wait," he said, his deep Russian-accented voice echoing across the hall. "Why not let her play?" The crowd chuckled. A few gasps followed. Viktor smiled, savoring the theatricality of it all. "Yes, please," he said, gesturing to the empty chair at the 11th board. "Take a seat, madam. Let us have some fun." The woman hesitated. Her eyes flickered to the audience, then to Viktor, then down at the board. For a moment, it looked like she might refuse. But then, quietly, she nodded. She walked to the chair, sat down, and placed her handbag by her feet. She didn't say a word. The laughter grew louder. Viktor smirked. "Do you know the rules, madam?" She lifted her gaze to his and spoke for the first time, her voice soft but steady. "Yes, I know the rules." There was something in her tone, calm, almost distant, that made Viktor pause for a second longer than he intended. Then, with a dramatic flourish, he set the white pieces in front of her. "Then, please, begin." She opened with pawn to d4. A solid move, but common among beginners who had memorized the basics. Viktor smiled. "Ah, the queen's pawn. Safe. Predictable," he responded without hesitation. As he moved on to the next boards, the audience whispered among themselves. Some felt sorry for her. Others couldn't wait for Viktor to humiliate her in less than 10 moves. A few were simply entertained by the spectacle. But when Viktor returned for his second move, something made him slow down. The woman had advanced her knight, not recklessly, but with purpose. Viktor raised an eyebrow. "Interesting. Perhaps she read a beginner's book," he responded coolly, then moved to the next board. By her third move, however, a subtle shift had occurred. Her pieces were positioned cleanly, efficiently, with none of the clumsy hesitation that amateurs usually displayed. Her posture remained still, hands folded neatly in her lap after each move. Her eyes never wavered from the board. Minutes ticked by. Viktor began to notice something he hadn't expected. He was thinking. Not much, but enough to feel the faintest tug of resistance. By her 8th move, the murmurs in the audience grew quieter. Some leaned forward, sensing something unusual. The smile on Viktor's lips had faded ever so slightly. He studied the board. She had lured him into a variation he had not anticipated. It wasn't a beginner's trap. It was precise, surgical. He adjusted, confident he could crush her with patience. Yet the silence in the room deepened. Other games continued. He was winning easily on the other boards, but each time he returned to the gray-dressed woman, her position was sharp, tidy, deliberate. Half an hour passed. The room was no longer laughing. Viktor stood at her board, staring harder now. His jaw tightened. She had forced him into a complicated middle game, one that demanded his full attention. His knight was pinned. His rook's file was blocked. His queen had fewer options than he liked. The woman's face remained expressionless. Her hands never fidgeted. Her breathing was calm, steady. Someone in the audience whispered too loudly, "Who was she?" No one answered. For the first time all evening, Viktor felt the heat of pressure rising in his chest. He played a cautious move, then turned sharply to his other boards, brushing off his irritation. He finished them quickly, but when he returned, she was ready. Another blow. Another cut. Her bishop slid into position with such elegance that a small gasp escaped the crowd. Viktor froze. That wasn't random. That wasn't luck. That was knowledge. He glanced at her again. The plain dress. The quiet demeanor. The handbag by her feet. She didn't look like a chess master, didn't look like she belonged in this glittering hall at all. And yet, with every move, she was unraveling him. By now, every spectator was focused on them alone. The other boards were forgotten. Phones were raised. The silence was suffocating. Viktor felt sweat forming at his temple. He adjusted his jacket, forcing a smile. "You play well," he said stiffly. She looked up at him with calm eyes. "So do you." The simplicity of her words cut deeper than any boast. He sat down. For the first time that night, the Grandmaster sat at a board instead of hovering over it. His fingers drummed the table. His eyes narrowed. He was in a fight. And then, as if to taunt him further, she sacrificed a knight. A bold, reckless move, or so it seemed. Viktor's lips curled. Finally, a mistake. He captured it instantly. But within 3 moves, realization struck him like ice in his veins. It wasn't a mistake. It was a trap. The room collectively inhaled. Viktor stared at the board, stunned. His queen was cornered. His rook was threatened. The trap had been laid with such elegance, such quiet inevitability, that he hadn't seen it coming. His chest tightened. He looked up, but she wasn't watching him. She wasn't basking in the attention of the crowd. Her eyes were on the board, calm, distant, as though this game was nothing more than inevitable. For the first time in years, Viktor Antonov, the Grandmaster who had humiliated hundreds, who mocked beginners for sport, felt fear on a chessboard. And the hall, once filled with laughter, was silent. Utterly silent. The air inside the hall had thickened. You could almost hear the weight of the silence pressing down on the audience. Every eye was locked on the board between Grandmaster Viktor Antonov and the woman in gray. Viktor leaned forward, studying the trap she had laid. His mind, once calm and fluid, felt sluggish. His queen's escape routes were sealed. His pawns had been manipulated into uselessness. He could not believe it. This wasn't a casual player mimicking book moves. This was precision. This was mastery. The woman sat still, her hands folded neatly, her gaze serene. Not triumphant, not smug. Just steady. Viktor exhaled sharply and forced himself to focus. He was still the Grandmaster. He had clawed out of worse positions before. He would claw out again. But deep down, he knew something chilling. Every attempt to escape had been anticipated. He tried aggression, pushing a pawn forward to create chaos. She responded instantly, sliding her bishop diagonally with surgical coldness. Gasps rippled through the room. The bishop's move neutralized his attack and deepened his entrapment. Viktor's throat tightened. He sat back, running a hand through his silver-streaked hair. Who is she? The audience was restless now. Murmurs grew louder. She must be a master, someone whispered. No, impossible, she's not listed anywhere, another replied. A young boy tugged at his father's sleeve. Papa, is she winning? The father could only nod. Minutes passed. Viktor began to sweat openly. The cameras captured every twitch, every frown, every bead of perspiration. He was no longer playing 20 games. He had abandoned all other boards. Volunteers quietly began clearing them away, unnoticed by most. There was only one board left. One opponent left, and she was dismantling him. Finally, desperate, Viktor tried a queen trade. He shoved his piece forward, hoping to relieve pressure. The woman blinked once, then slowly shook her head. With a quiet grace, she declined the trade and instead advanced a pawn that opened an invisible door. Viktor's eyes widened. Within 2 moves, he saw it, the pawn was unstoppable. A promotion was inevitable. A murmur surged like thunder. The crowd had seen it too. And then, something happened no one expected. Viktor Antonov, the proud, unflinching Grandmaster, stood up. His chair screeched against the polished floor. He adjusted his jacket, his hands trembling ever so slightly. "I resign," he muttered. The words hit the hall like a strike of lightning. For a moment, no one moved. No one breathed. Then the silence shattered into chaos. Gasps, cries, applause, disbelief. Cameras flashed like fireworks. Reporters surged forward. The woman did not move. She sat quietly, hands folded, as if she had known this moment was coming all along. The host of the exhibition rushed forward, pale and stammering. "Ladies and gentlemen, Grandmaster Antonov has resigned. Against this unexpected challenger." The host turned, flustered. "Madam, may I ask your name?" Slowly, the woman stood. She picked up her handbag, brushed her dress, and turned to face the audience. Her eyes, soft and intelligent, carried a weight of unspoken history. "My name," she said quietly, "is Elena Morozova." A stunned silence followed. For some, the name meant nothing. But for a handful of older spectators, the effect was immediate. Eyes widened, whispers spread like wildfire. "Morozova," someone hissed. "It can't be." Viktor froze. The name hit him like a ghost. Elena Morozova. She had been a rising star in the late 1980s. A Soviet chess prodigy whose games were whispered about in smoky halls, whose brilliance was compared to legends. She had crushed masters twice her age before she turned 20. But then, she disappeared. No official matches, no appearances. Rumors swirled. Illness, politics, family tragedies. Some claimed she had been banned for defying Federation officials. Others said she had chosen a quiet life far from the spotlight. And here she was. After 3 decades, she had appeared in a plain dress, sat down at a board as if it were nothing, and humbled a reigning giant. The room exploded with noise again, but Elena raised a hand. Silence fell instantly. She looked at Viktor. Her expression was neither cruel nor triumphant. It was calm, almost kind. "You play too much for the audience," she said softly. "Not for the board." Her words cut deeper than any defeat. Viktor felt them burn in his chest. He had mocked her, invited her as a joke, and she had dismantled him without raising her voice. The cameras zoomed in, desperate to catch every expression. Viktor's jaw tightened. He wanted to protest, to argue, to reclaim dignity. But there was nothing to say. The board told the story. "Why now?" Viktor asked, his voice low but audible through the microphone. "Why return after so many years?" Elena's gaze softened. "I never left," she said. "I only stopped playing for applause." Her words lingered in the air. The host tried to regain control, thanking her nervously, praising her brilliance. But the audience wasn't listening to him anymore. They were on their feet, clapping, cheering, some shouting her name. Viktor stood stiffly, then extended his hand. His pride screamed against it, but he had no choice. To refuse would be humiliation beyond repair. Elena looked at his hand for a long moment, then shook it gently. And just like that, the match was over. But the story wasn't. Within hours, social media exploded. Clips of the match spread across platforms, racking up millions of views. Headlines screamed, "Unknown woman defeats Grandmaster at exhibition." Elena Morozova returns after 30 years. Antonov resigns in shocking upset. Chess forums lit up with speculation. Analysts pored over the footage, marveling at her moves. Commentators called it a lesson in humility, and the most extraordinary comeback in modern chess history. By dawn, Elena's name was known worldwide again. Yet, when reporters tried to find her, she was gone. She had left the hall quietly, slipping into the Vienna night before anyone noticed. No interviews, no celebrations, only a single note was left with the organizers, written in delicate handwriting. It was never about victory. It was about reminding the world that true chess is played in silence, not for spectacle. As for Viktor Antonov, the defeat haunted him. He avoided cameras, declined interviews. But something had changed in him. Days later, In a rare statement, he admitted. She showed me a truth I had forgotten. I thanked her for it, though it was the hardest lesson of my career. And somewhere, far from the flashing cameras and glittering halls, Elena Morozova returned to her quiet life, anonymous, unbothered, her genius intact. Perhaps she would never be seen again. But for those who were there, that night would never be forgotten. The night a Grandmaster invited a simple woman as a joke, and was silenced by the quiet brilliance of a legend.